Hi, and welcome back to Kegels and Coffee. My name is Isabel, and I'm your host. The following conversation with my mother I recorded back in 2022. So it has been a few years, and honestly, at the time, I didn't really think about when or even if I would publish it, but I just knew in my heart that I needed to have her story on tape. In order to get her to record, because she doesn't really like speaking publicly, I had to trade my time working with her on her hillside in Montana, preparing the burn pile for the fall. My mother spends hours on her land, pulling invasive weeds, collecting and spreading seeds, talking to the birds, and maybe giving names to the spiders. Her land is her sanctuary. A few weeks ago, the time had come. I was feeling a bit down and in much need of inspiration. So I dug out our recording because what better way than to listen to my mom's own story? Growing up, it almost felt normal what an extraordinary life my mom had lived. The traveler was definitely in her. Her mother's grandparents had come in covered wagons and settled in Roundup, Montana during the early 1890s. My grandmother, Betty Wetzel, author of the book After You, Mark Twain, literally traveled the world following his footsteps. And just like my grandmother spent her summers on the ranch with her grandparents, I grew up spending my summers with her and my grandfather on Flathead Lake. That was the one condition my mom had when agreeing to raise my brother and me in Germany. She wanted us to have a relationship with her family and her roots. How did my mom end up in Germany? Well, I guess you'll have to listen, but there were quite some detours, including India. One thing is certain, my mom took the road less traveled. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this apple has not fallen very far from the tree. My German uncle always told my dad that my brother and I were cursed to never feel at home, but always in search of. I disagree. Not all who wander are lost, and this I know to be true. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that home is a feeling that comes from inside. If you're not at home in your heart, nothing can fill this. Not a place, not a person. My life wouldn't have been the same had I not spent my summers in Montana. It opened up worlds to me, the Rocky Mountains, the lake, lying in the hammock with my grandmother watching the pine trees gently swaying to the wind and her songs. I feel like I owe so much to my mom. She instilled in me a sense for adventure. She gave me courage to have dreams and the strength to actually pursue them. To me, my mom has navigated life with incredible grace and a very tender heart. I hope you enjoy.
No, seriously, what am I doing with my life?
How did that come across? Did they hear me?
I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind.
You're messed up.
I need to just Netflix and chill.
Like I'm gonna meditate like a badass.
It's just like this psychotic break, and then I get my period, and I'm like, oh, it was just your period again.
Am I the only one feeling this crazy? I should tell this story about Mammy. Do you remember the story why I called you Mammy?
Yes, because your telephone called me Mammy.
So, to give a little background, in German you say Mama or Mummy, and I called you Mummy, so I had you in my phone as Mummy, but then in America my cell phone said Mammy calling. And that stuck forever.
Mammy.
Mammy. So, Mammy, I want to go back, way back. Actually, I'm curious. Do you know what your first memory is? You were born in Glendive, Montana.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine would it have been there?
Yes.
And what do you think was that?
Well, let me see. First memory. It's difficult, but I think one of the earliest memories I have is but that must have been I would have been 4-ish when my sister Rebecca was born. And I wasn't allowed to go to the hospital, into the hospital. I had to wait out in front of the hospital. And my father left me sitting on the lawn in front of the hospital all by myself, and I cried because I was left alone.
Oh, that's a sad memory.
Yeah, I didn't think that was nice.
No.
And just because a bratty sister had arrived.
Oh, wow. That's interesting because I actually never get to have that experience because I am the youngest. That must be interesting.
Well, she wasn't so bad after all.
Yeah, she...
And then she liked to play tiddlywinks. I can still remember the first time she was in diaper, I think, and she had the tiddlywinks, and she poked it, and it jumped into the little cup it was supposed to jump in, and she was tickled pink.
Oh, that is cute. Tiddlywinks, is that the little metal balls with all the little...
No, with the little plastic discs, and you take one and you press the edge of it, and it jumps.
Oh, right, and the other one jumps. Tiddlywinks. I didn't know that was what you called that.
I think it's called tiddlywinks.
So wait, how long did you guys stay in Glendive? Because I know that you also then went to Whitefish eventually.
My time in Glendive was then until third grade. And then we moved to Whitefish.
That's quite a while. How big is Glendive? I don't even know.
I don't know now. It's really shrunk. It might be down to a couple thousand. I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, smaller town. So I want to jump to, there's so many things I would love to talk about and hear about. But one of the things that for me always stood out was, so you lived in Whitefish, but then your father, my grandpa, got a job in India, and you were...
Not from Whitefish.
You were...
We went to Missoula.
Missoula first. Or first Whitefish and then Missoula.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were already in Missoula when he got that job. And you were 16?
I was 15 when we left.
How does that sit with you when your parents come at that age and say we're moving to India? Not only that, you were actually... So you should go into that because... You actually didn't get to really move where they were because you had to go to boarding school.
Yeah, exactly. We were all good with it. We just thought it sounded really exciting. And I didn't have any problems at all with leaving friends or the neighborhood or... anything like that.
That's interesting. I could see that age being sort of tricky, because you're like teenager and like you're starting to make some more important friendships or anything. But
no, not at all. I mean, it just sounded exciting.
That's awesome. Did they tell you from the beginning that you were going to live somewhere else there?
Yeah, I knew from the very beginning that I would be in a boarding school because my parents were going to Dhaka, now Bangladesh, at that time East Pakistan. And they didn't have a school for upperclassmen. So the only place I could go was to New Delhi, where they had an American international school at that time.
So you got there and you had your little suitcase and just...
I think... I'm not even sure if I arrived with my suitcase.
Did they not make it?
I think something got lost in traffic.
I bet. How long was that flight back in those days?
Well, actually, I didn't fly straight over. It was pretty weird because I was allowed to make stops on the way. Ford Foundation paid for it, for the trip over. And so I stopped in Hawaii, and someone, I guess, picked me up and took me to my hotel. And then I was sort of on my own. I spent, 2 nights there and did a little sightseeing on my own.
Wow. That's pretty independent for those days at that age.
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised when I look back on it myself that I wasn't intimidated.
Right.
And it was interesting. I met some guy. Everyone thought I was older too. I met some guy, and he was a pilot, and he wanted me to he wanted to take me up in his private plane. I passed on that. Yeah, and then from Hawaii, then I flew to Hong Kong, and then there was someone from Ford Foundation who picked me up there and took me to the hotel. And the next day, I think they drove me around to show me Hong Kong. And then I just sort of went around on my own as well. Yeah.
Wow, and that is, I would think, I've never been, would be a very intimidating city to me.
It's funnily enough, I wasn't intimidated, but I think my mother was having
an anxiety attack.
She had an anxiety attack afterwards because, well, for one thing, we didn't have the internet or telephone. We couldn't just call or
check in and say, send a quick email, I'm good, I'm at the internet cafe.
No, there was nothing like that. Yeah, but I didn't feel intimidated, but I was very innocent.
Well, and I think ignorance is bliss, because sometimes I look back at my time in South America and I don't know that I would do the things that I did back then again right now. You're like sort of energized and just have this not necessarily ignorance, but I think this like optimism and this extra energy.
Well, you probably haven't, if you've never experienced really bad things, I don't think you expect to have.
That's a good point. Yeah, you don't go in with that fear or something.
No, I wasn't afraid of anything. No, I was just interested in everything. Yeah, and then from Hong Kong, you went shopping, of course. You had to go shopping in Hong Kong.
What is that like?
Oh, well, I had not a clue, and I didn't know the difference between a tourist place or a non-tourist place or whatever. But I did buy I have to admit, I think it was probably ivory. I don't know, in those days. It wasn't something that a 15-year-old person would know. That wasn't a good thing to buy. But it was a cribbage board. And I actually just found it when Mom died. I found it. I think I must have given it to them. It was up in the drawer upstairs. So it's back in my possession.
That is beautiful. You have to show that to me later. Yeah. Cribbage, that's such a thing in our family. I don't think that even people know what cribbage is anymore.
Yeah, and then from there, I was flying into New Delhi with a stop in Saigon on the way, where the Vietnam War was going on. And I have to tell you, I flew first class, because Ford Foundation flew their people first class.
Wow.
So on these different flights, I guess I looked older than I was anyway. So everyone was, would you like red wine or white wine or champagne or after dinner drink or whatever?
Did you say yes?
Sure.
Nice.
Well, on this flight,
love that.
I was sitting next to, a French general or something like that. I have no idea what his rank was, but he must have been high up there because he was flying first class. And he sat next to me and he said, now this is caviar, this you have to try this, and this is champagne, and I'll have a little champagne. Yes, and so he guided me through this very elaborate dinner. And in those days, the first class was really something else. Everything was fresh and beautiful, and you could choose whatever. And so when the time came to go to sleep, I was felt this little hand coming over onto my
No
knee.
way. You're serious? Wow.
Yes, so I pulled my covers very tight.
Oh my gosh. You stayed calm
I stayed calm.
and just set your boundaries.
I just tucked myself in tightly.
Wow. How old?
Well,
how
that
much-
was the funny thing is, I guess I looked at everyone was like, "Okay, are you flying out to meet your husband?" And I said, "No,
Wow.
I'm flying out to go to junior. I'm a junior in high school. I'm going to be
You were
going
so
to my
mature
boarding school."
already. Yeah.
So yes, yeah, and I forgot to say, I didn't fly direct to Hawaii. I flew into L.A. to visit my sister Susan and Paul. And I hadn't seen the ocean either.
Oh my goodness. So they
that
were
was
already living down there.
They were living in Anaheim at the time. And
So
I
it was
hadn't
your
seen the
first time
ocean,
seeing
so it was
the
the first
ocean.
time I'd seen the ocean.
So this move to India initiated this entire new wave of completely new experiences from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't been anywhere.
Wow, that's so cool.
We haven't even, maybe across the border to Canada or
Right.
someone like that, but not out
all
of state.
within Montana. That is crazy. So eventually, after making sure this guy was not touching you, the plane landed. And was that the final destination?
In New Delhi,
New
yeah.
Delhi, yeah.
Yeah, and that was sort of interesting too. Somehow or other, they forgot to pick me up at the airport.
Your parents?
Yeah,
Oh.
the school.
The school was
But
okay.
the boarding house, I was under the radar, and so there I stood, and it's funny. It's also so fuzzy nowadays because I of course didn't have any Indian money. I did, fortunately, have the address to where I was going, and I got a taxi and got in it and drove to my new home in New Delhi.
Wow. Did you get scared standing there? I mean, you didn't have a way to communicate, and you also had no way to pay, so you just assumed they would pay the taxi.
Yeah, I just assumed that. And well, I had dollars. They always wanted dollars anyway.
Right.
But yeah, and that was challenging, but I can't remember being afraid or anything. I was like, "Do you know this address?" And it was our school was in the embassy area, so people knew pretty much where everything
that was, yeah.
When I arrived in India, I came by myself because my school started earlier. And so my parents and Becky were leaving later for when Dad started his job, and she started school in Dhaka. But then the war broke out between India and Pakistan, and they couldn't fly. So they had sold the house in Montana, and then they were living in some rental place at first in Montana. Then they let Dad go around, I don't know, sometime before Christmas, and he managed to call me on the telephone when he had a layover in New Delhi before flying on. So I knew he was there in Pakistan. But that's all I knew. And then, well, and we had no cell phones and no communication. It was, as I said, telegrams, and they went by way of the United States to Great Britain, to London, and then from there to New Delhi. And it took a while. So there was really not much communication going on at that time. I didn't know where my parents were. I didn't know where anyone was or when they were arriving until Dad came through. I guess it must have been sometime in the fall. He got over there maybe October, November. But that's all I knew, that he had gotten to Dhaka.
Wow.
And then, and of course, they weren't getting very much communication from me because letters were also not going just regular, normal postage.
Right.
So Christmas rolled around, and the dorm parents and the administrator from the school, they weren't going to let me go.
Wow.
Because no one knew where I was going and how I was going to get
So
there.
you were stuck.
And I remember I was sitting there and everyone had left for Christmas vacation, and this committee of older people was sitting there and told me, no, you're going to have to stay here. We can't let you go. And I said, well, I'm going, and I'll just fly into Bangkok, and from Bangkok I can get on a flight, and then I can go to Dhaka. And I said, my dad's there somewhere. I can.
Oh, that's so sweet. And so what did they say?
Well, I still haven't been able to really figure out why they let me go, because I flew, and I guess Ford Foundation must have paid for my ticket, and I had an address or something, and so I got on a plane and flew by myself to Bangkok, and not knowing what I was going to do. But I was there.
And so you got to Bangkok
and I got to Bangkok, and I wasn't doing anything. I was just sort of going along, and then someone said, "It looks like there's someone out there waving at you." And I looked up, and there was Dad.
In Bangkok?
In Bangkok.
Because you were going to keep flying.
Well, I had to change planes.
Right.
So I...
But you did not expect to run into
I didn't
him.
expect him. So somehow or other, he got a telegram saying that I would be arriving on this plane.
Wow.
And so he had flown in from Dhaka.
Oh, my God.
So he was just sort of meeting every plane that came.
Oh, my God.
So that was, so there we had this very surprise reunion there. And then he knew that Mom and Becky were supposed to be coming in from Hong Kong at some time that day. So we were meeting planes from Hong Kong.
Oh my goodness. So you started gathering the people one by one.
And so
running around the airport.
So Becky and Mom weren't expecting anything until someone told them, well, looks like someone's waving at you.
So wild.
It was a pretty emotional reunion, everyone getting together because no one had known where everyone was and where they were going. So that was a quite of interesting
special holiday.
And then of course the problem was I didn't have a visa for Pakistan because when the war broke out, I hadn't gotten my visa in the United States. It hadn't arrived in time. And so I had to try and get a visa in order to fly into Dhaka, which we did manage to do. And so we were able to fly in, I think, the day before Christmas or something like that. We arrived in Dhaka.
Wow, what a special way of gathering your family for Christmas. Jesus. That sounds so intense and so emotional. It's almost like there was definitely some universal forces helping you.
Yeah, that was an interesting time.
So you were there for basically your high school years.
Junior and senior.
And were a lot of the other students from the U.S. or was it a mix?
It was an international school, so there were a lot of from other countries as well, in all sorts of aid and educational programs and things like that, diplomatic people and missionaries and whatever. And there were Indian students as well, but mostly Americans, I think.
So who are you still in touch with from that era?
Sarah Snyder. Been in touch with her for over the years. They visited us in Germany also twice.
Nice.
And Twyla. We played on the basketball team together, and she was my roommate. Sal was a roommate too the first year, and I think Twyla was in the second year. I don't think you've met her. She visited us here in Bigfork with another one of my classmates who was also a year younger, same as Twyla. Carol, she was also on the basketball team.
Wow, nice.
Those one passed away.
Right.
She was also a junior.
She was
also on the basketball team. We had a good
had a good
crew.
basketball team
We had a
going.
good
I
basketball
love it.
team, yeah. Boy, we fought against those Indian teams. They were good.
Were they?
Ooh, and they were tough, especially the Sikh girls. Boy, were they strong and tall.
Really?
Yeah, they were good. So, and of course the Vanderbilts. You knew
Right,
them.
right.
Ed passed away.
Yeah, my
But,
godparents.
Jade is still around. And Rick,
Right.
you met Rick. He
passed
died
away. Yeah.
of AIDS. Yeah, I think that's about it.
When you were there, did you have a lot of interaction with Indian people outside of the boarding school institution and just other, families and stuff like this? Or was it, because I know you at some point also, didn't you say you worked at an orphanage?
I did that. We had there was an organization in school where you could go out and help. And I worked in an orphanage for a while. And then I had a lot of contact through Rick, because his father was the head of Ford Foundation in India and Nepal, and so they included me in lots of they invited me, and I'd stay overnight or be invited for dinner, or they'd take me to church on Sunday morning in their horse-driven coach.
Wow.
That was always fun. And if they were attending an Indian wedding, they'd include me in it. And they had what was her name? Charlotte Weiser. She wrote a book, Behind Mud Walls, I think, as I recall. And she often came and stayed with the Ensmingers. And so I got to know her. She was not Indian. But she was living in village India. So, but the best thing was our hostel father, Ed. He was working on his PhD in. His field was geography, and I think at that time he was studying irrigation in India, in the Punjab, I think. And so he had a village, and from that certain village, he was doing his research in that area. And so he took us with him to the village a couple of times, and we lived behind mud walls. And, in the morning, you headed for the field to take care of your business. And, of course, we as foreigners were quite interesting for children. And so we always had a mob of kids following us.
When you were trying to take a poop?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I can remember I was wearing a red blouse, and they were chasing behind me, and they were saying, Lal Murgi, and they were calling me the Red Rooster. And I was trying to shoo them off so that I could go and find myself a little place to squat down. Yeah, and it was interesting too, because if you had to take care of a need at night, I got up and wanted to head out, but the camels were all kneeled down and outside and everything, and they were just sort of intimidating, and they sort of went for me, and so I decided I didn't have to go so bad after all. We slept on the roof on charpoys, those woven bed-like affairs. It was beautiful, except one time when we were there was a dust storm, and dust storms are really pretty awful. There's no way you can keep dust out of your ears and eyes and nose, and it was pretty awful. But it was just interesting, and the food was good, and we had all curry, and we ate with our fingers and only with the right hand, because you don't use the left hand because that's your toilet hand.
Right.
And they cooked over open fire, and I'm sure that they used cow dung patties that burn nicely. Yeah, but it was a huge experience. I mean, opportunity for us, because it's not somewhere you just get in to a village and you can say, "Can I spend the night?"
Right.
Can I see what it's like living inside your village? So we were really lucky to have Ed take us.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Once I asked you, would you go back? And you said, I don't think I would, because I would like to keep India in the memory that I have, because it's changed so much, which is understandable.
Well, I don't know if it's so much the change, but I know I'm sure I wouldn't enjoy Delhi like we knew it, because like the embassy area of New Delhi was all open. And now the school that I went to and the beautiful embassy buildings that they had at that time, they're all behind walls.
Yeah.
It's for security reasons. And the freedom we had even from the boarding school, we could just take a bus or take a baby taxi or take a normal taxi or walk, or we sneak out of the dormitory at night over the wall, and off we went by foot into the jungle and have a picnic.
Wow. Yeah, definitely can't do that anymore.
No, I mean, that type of freedom you didn't. Oh, we were even worse than that. We climbed over with Rick, Sarah, and I don't know who else might have been along. We climbed over the wall to the ambassador's yard and went swimming in his swimming pool when he wasn't there.
You are kidding.
No.
Wow, Mommy, I
Can you
didn't know
imagine
that
doing
you were
that
such
now?
a rebel.
I don't think you would be able to do that nowadays.
No, I don't think so either.
And the other thing then was nice is that we could, during the vacation times, we were also able to travel, and Ford Foundation often, were helpful. And like one time I went home with Sal. Her family was in West Pakistan, so we drove with a Ford car to Lahore, and the whole Grand Trunk Road that we were driving on, it was a really beautiful drive. And then because there was a war going on, I was never able to fly home to East Pakistan, Bangladesh, directly. So I could fly to Karachi in West Pakistan and then to East Pakistan, or I could fly to Kathmandu or to Lahore. It was crazy, but I couldn't go directly over the border, which was unfortunate because that way I never got to see a lot of part of the country, Benares and places down further. I wasn't able to go there because I couldn't drive over the border.
Yeah.
So that was too bad.
Yeah, talking about wars, as you mentioned earlier, the Vietnam War was going on. So in the meantime, in the U.S., this whole thing is unraveling and, causing all sorts of uproar and division. That must have been a culture shock to come back to. Because how much were you actually, as you said, the communication in those days, it wasn't like you're sending messages with people or, you're as connected. I mean, you were obviously informed about world politics, but just to understand, what was going on here would have been hard because you're in such a different environment.
Well, it was when we were leaving for India and Pakistan, we were always warned about the cultural shock that you would have when going to India. And I didn't suffer from cultural shock going to India. I just found everything so wonderfully interesting and different and engaging and I don't know what all. But when I returned to the United States, it was a cultural shock because I went to college and everyone was interested in drugs and in sex and then everything. No one was interested in my wonderful experiences or what was going on in the world other than, of course, Vietnam. And I found the scene of I demonstrated against the Vietnam War and I will never forget the evenings when the numbers were drawn for who was going to go to war, and the girls would be who had boyfriends, and they would, or brothers or whatever, be waiting to see if they were unlucky and their brother or the boyfriend would be drawn up to war. But I didn't seem to have much in common with the normal university students, and I was living off campus the first semester anyway because I had not applied to schools on the East Coast and had only been accepted at the universities on the West Coast. And this was one place I could get into. They found a place for me, but I had to live off campus because there was no room in the dorm. So anyway, I would go to the the dining hall, and I didn't have a roommate or anyone from my dorm, and I didn't know anyone. But the foreign students were there, and they all sat at the table together, and you could tell them because they were different colors. And anyway, so I got to know all the foreign students, and they were mostly graduate students, or at least upperclassmen. And so I just got into their group, and it was a fun group because they had parties every weekend, and they danced like crazy, and they did the limbo, and I don't know what all, and pata pata. Anyway, we danced, and we had fun, and it was just a good time with them, and they were interesting, and I took a whole lot of them home with me. Mom and Dad were in New York at the time, and And so they'd come home and they helped Mom and Dad move from one house to the new place that they were moving into.
Oh, that's nice.
And there was a guy from Ethiopia, Olula. Dad just loved him. He always asked him, when is Olula coming again?
Oh, that's
Then
sweet.
we had another friend. He was from Thailand. And then there was a guy from South America. So, it's just they would come and go. And that was I had a good time.
I have to say I can identify with that very much because, as you know, I think the best friends that I made in college were that international crew of Natalie, Solange, Magali, and oftentimes grad students. It's almost, just like, and not to be judgmental or arrogant or anything, it's just a different group, a different kind of interest. We went salsa dancing and cooked together, and I think some of it for me, and this might have been different for you, but I think for me some of it was like I had gotten sort of my partying a little out of the system and I was ready to study and have fun. But like you said, I wasn't interested in drugs and this and that and the other. It was just a little bit of a different scene.
Yeah, well, and they were interested in what I had experienced, and I wanted to know what their experience was and what was their country like. And kids my age at school, they weren't so interested in that.
Yeah. So I know that you met Hage, my father, during college. Do you think that he's from Germany? Do you think that was also again a little bit of that, same phenomenon of being more attracted to somebody who is from a different country and might have different priorities or have like a different background? I see you smiling.
No, it's so funny. I guess I just was not meant for the United States because no guy ever looked at me in the United States. I never had any dates and so I think I just had to look elsewhere.
You had to look elsewhere. Well, this is what has happened to me since I've been here. I didn't really date in college, and I am not with an American guy. I think that runs in the family or something.
I don't know. We're just
we're
weird.
We're
weird. No one ever looked at me. I never had. I just didn't have
gorgeous,
dates.
though, and so smart.
No one thought I was gorgeous or anything. But yeah, I don't know. But it was that was the typical thing. No one was interested in me, so I hitchhiked. My girlfriend and I in where my mom lived, where my parents lived, near Bear Mountain Park. I worked in the Bear Mountain Park, north of New York City on the Hudson, in the summers. And I got to know a gal who worked there as well. And she was also just on the street from Mom and Dad. Her grandmother was, I think. And then when I was in university in New Paltz, I got to know this gal who, and we discovered she lived in my dorm, and we became good friends. And we discovered that we had a friend in common, this gal in upstate New York. So one weekend we decided we would hitchhike up from New Paltz up to Albany and visit her.
How far was that?
Well, it's a couple of hours, I guess. So the two of us hitchhiked, and I don't want you to do that. We hitchhiked and it was all good and so that evening, a Saturday night, we all went to Troy, New York, which was the home of Rensselaer, where Hage was going to school. And Troy was actually, I think, all it was a street of bars.
And that's where the students were?
And that's where, because all that whole area, there are private Catholic girls' schools and private girls' school and guys' school and some mixed schools and universities and all sorts of colleges. And so they all descended on Troy on the weekend and went bar hopping. And, of course, my friend Christine, she was just really cute, and I think that's who Hage really liked. But he got stuck with me somehow. But anyway, so the other ones were off and dancing or chatting someone up, and I was sort of standing there, as usual, the wallflower, and there was this group of guys, and they were speaking German, and I had taken a bit of German then, a semester or so. So I was standing there, trying to see if I could understand something, and I heard something about Beine, legs, and I figured, well, they were probably talking about my bow ones or whatever. And they reacted surprised because they thought I had understood something, and they were uncomfortable.
So what were they saying?
Well, I don't remember, but maybe they were talking about my legs. I don't know.
Oh, anyways, you do have nice long legs.
So we got talking to them. There were three. One graduate student, older guy, he was studying architecture. Then there was one who was in physics, and then there was Hage. And so we all ended up in this big group with these Germans then, and when the bar closed, and the guy who was the upperclassman, I think, and he was already teaching, he had an office, and so we broke into his office and partied up there in his office until the night guard came and
kicked you out.
Came and threw us out.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and that's how I got to know Ike.
One of the things that I always find so incredible, because, I've had a little bit of a similar story with Pata, where I met somebody who lives in Europe and I'm in the U.S., and then decided to, explore that relationship and do the back and forth. And, as hard as it is or was, things are so different these days, because you take a flight, you go there, it's 2 days, you arrive, you spend a few months or a few weeks, you come back. In those days, you guys were traveling in ship.
When he came over, the foreign students came, the Fulbright scholarship ones, they all came on by boat, and they just sort of gathered them up from all the different countries, and they came over.
So when he left, you told me this story that the ship was parked and getting ready to... it's such a different experience than dropping somebody off at the airport, right?
Yeah.
Where it's you go to the gate, you say goodbye, you cry, and then you get back in your car, you cry a little bit more, you go back home, you cry some more. But you were saying you were standing at the harbor, and they're just... It reminds me of Titanic. Sorry to be so cheesy and stereotypical, but the Titanic, I'm just imagining this ginormous ship, and he's standing up there waving his handkerchief or something like this. Did he even see you down there?
I don't know. I don't remember, but anyway.
And then it didn't take too long for you to say, okay, I'm going to do this. You basically said you were pretty miserable and ready to make that move.
Yeah,
you were 20 or 20. How old were you?
The first part of my junior year, and I left then at the beginning of the next year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so...
That's young.
Yeah, it was, and it was okay, well, we don't know. Are we going to? We had not spoken of marriage or anything like that, but I have a relationship, and where is it going to go? And he couldn't return to the United States to live for a couple of years because they they don't allow people who study here, I think, I don't know how it is now, to stay then in the United States because they don't want the brain drain. They don't want to just have people educated and then not go back to their own places.
Right. I'm just trying to, in my head, think about that age of my life.
I have this problem about getting picked up at airports and stuff.
Wait, where are you jumping to?
Well,
Is this
I was just thinking, so when I arrived in
Germany?
Nobody
picked
Berlin,
you up either?
No one picked
Oh my God.
Well, my flight had been canceled, and in those days it was still telegrams, those things.
Well, I was about to say, it's so funny again. We have like WhatsApp and then Skype and emails and text messages.
Changed so much.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was a child, I was still like, pen paling with like my cousins in America and waiting 3 weeks for the letter. But you guys, that telegram, that was a thing.
Yeah, and so the airlines sent a telegram to AG in Berlin, first saying that the flight was canceled, and then a telegram followed that I would be arriving on a different plane or whatever, but when I would be arriving. But he didn't get it. So
Oh, no.
he didn't get the telegram, and so when he got the first telegram, then he stomped off to the library to study, and so when I arrived in Berlin, no one was there at the airport to
greet
me.
with flowers
I had
and things.
his address, so again I found a taxi.
Oh my God.
And came in. Then I was standing in front of this huge old building, and there was, his name wasn't on the outside, and it had one of those entrance ways that you went through it, and then there was a big courtyard in the middle, and then all these doors, so where different people lived in different. And I was standing there with my suitcases and looking forlorn, I suppose. And this guy came out of one of them, and he looked at me and he said something about, did I need help, or where was I going, or what was I looking for, or something. And anyway, I said, well, this is the address, and I wanted to go to the Hans Georg. Yeah. And he said, oh, well, that's good. I've got the key. He lives in my apartment.
Oh my goodness, you got lucky.
So it was nice because it was cold and snowy.
Oh my God.
So I got in, and he showed me where Hans's room was, and it was very cold, and he had some sort of a funny gas heater, which I didn't dare touch because I thought it would probably explode. And so I finally just got in his bed and locked the door, and then when he came home, he was like trying to get in his door, and it was locked.
Was he excited to see you at least?
Well, he was surprised for sure. And I was sitting there wondering why he had this dozen red roses in his room and who they were for.
They were probably for you.
Yeah, they were. That's what I found out afterwards. Where he had come home and just stuffed them in there. And
well, because the telegram had told him you weren't coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember you saying that you enjoyed, and obviously, looking back at your life, it's very clear that you enjoy different cultures. You enjoy traveling. You enjoy connecting with locals and having that sort of vibrant life. It always reminds me of this quote that I once read in a book that says, life is like a quilt and every single piece makes the whole thing so beautiful. And I remember you once saying that when the time came to, quote unquote, settle, because now you were having kids and now Hage was settling for a job, that there was a part in you that was sad, that there was a part of you that was like, wow, that not vagabond life, because clearly you always had a plan, but that sort of more adventurous lifestyle was over. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, I just think I was. I think it was more the question of having children or not to have children.
Yeah, to have or not to have. You should listen to my last podcast, Mommy. That one is all about to have or not to have, because that is definitely the one thing that anchors you the most, other than a job, obviously.
Well, so it was just like, okay, well, I just didn't have the normal motherly instincts, and so I sort of finally gave in.
Right. I mean, I think for your generation, it was, even for my generation, it's hard to sort of follow your instincts. But for your generation, it seemed like it wasn't really an option oftentimes. It didn't feel like one anyways.
What do you mean option?
Like to say no. Yeah, because there's such a pressure.
He was, of course, very more traditional than I would say the Americans. Oh, I don't know. But anyway, it was just like expected.
Right.
That you were going to have children. Yeah, so it was, I still like you, Isabel. I don't regret having my two little brats.
Yeah, we're both pretty much a pain in the ass. I'm sorry that ended up happening, but yeah, but it was, I think the most startling part of everything was when I realized that, I had been living in Wuppertal forever. Right.
And we never moved. I mean, and we'd been just moving, and our family had been moving, and all of a sudden it stopped. It stopped.
Yeah.
And then our movement started between when Mom and Dad retired. The movement started then between the United States and Germany, Big Fork and Wuppertal.
That is one thing that I personally obviously very much appreciate and I'm glad that you did, is that you said if we have kids, I want them to have time with their grandparents in Montana and really get to spend time.
Although I've sometimes thought that was probably very selfish of me, limiting the vacation time to Montana and your grandparents or relatives in the United States. You've never been to Washington, D.C., and you don't know anything about the Constitution and the Capitol and the White House and all these things you've never seen, and everyone is supposed to have done that as a good American, but I never.
I don't know though, because I feel like that is something that is almost better to do it later in life and on your own, because you actually have more knowledge and interest and you can pick where you want to go. Because to me, the elements of upbringing that I was, receiving here in Montana every summer, especially being so close to my grandparents and very close to my grandmother, who just recently passed away. So I ended up having her literally as like a friend, a mentor, a mother figure, whatever you want to call it, for so many years. I mean, she died when I was 38, so at 102. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up having a relationship with her that is like no other. And very rare, and I got to be outside in nature. I got to swim in these beautiful lakes. I feel like as a child growing up, these elements to me personally were much, and I made friends that I'm still friends with, Jill and Isaac and Chris and all these people that now have become like family to me. So I feel like I personally don't regret it. I see what you're saying is like, you do your summer every year here, but it's such a beautiful place, and I'm very grateful for it, because also it made me have a relationship with America. I think if I'd come here every summer, and then it would have been like one summer Disney World, one summer Washington D.C., one summer New York, it would have been fun and it would have been a great time and it would have been inspiring. But I don't know, it would have made me feel that sense of home that I feel in the United States that I have today.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I did want you kids to, feel your American heritage and Yeah, you were baptized in the creek at the ranch in Roundup,
In
Montana.
Roundup, Montana, where my
So-
grandmother was born and raised, where her ancestors settled with covered wagons. That was the homestead. I still can't believe it. It's I need to actually go there with you. We have to go to Roundup. How do you feel about the double life? I know we talked about it the other day when we're sitting on the dock, and you're like, yeah, it's not easy because I'm going through all this change and decision making currently. But at the same time, it is beautiful because it offers such diversity. I mean, if I think about it now, we're sitting here on Flathead Lake, Montana, and looking out this window and this beautiful, huge lake, and such a, wild, gorgeous piece of land. And then I think about Germany, the little village Beyenburg that is, it has a little dam, it has the little river, the church in the middle, and it's very tucked away, and the house is very, very old and cozy and more closed feeling. You once said to me that place to you feels, like a womb almost, and this feels like you're out in the wilderness, in the open on this platter. And I would agree with that. I feel like Spain, the village that we spend time at, is, very cozy and very contained, and then the United States just is so vast. I would love to just hear anything that you have to say about the double life.
Well, no, I think that the most distressing part about the double life is that it makes it seem like your life is going twice as fast.
I know. My friend Sarah from Berlin and I were just talking about that because
And
time is always running out.
I always think that when I come here, I have so much time and I'm going to get all this stuff done.
Yeah.
And then I'm distracted by the outside and the activities and all these things that I'm supposed to be getting done I don't do, and I don't know. And then the older they get, the faster it all goes anyway. So.
Yeah. I will completely agree with you. When I get to Spain and I feel like I have months, it's almost like the moment you land, you start counting down, which is a symptom.
Which is it's a bad thing
habit,
to do.
but it's hard not to.
But I always happens to me that way too early on that I get all this knot in my stomach. You think, oh, there are only so and so many months left, which is gobs when you think of most people.
But the positive aspects of the double life is that you have two beautiful homes in two very beautiful places.
Yeah, we sure do, and totally opposite.
Yeah.
Totally opposite lives. That's good.
One of the things that you did every summer, as we spent, my brother and I, our summers here with Grandma and Grandpa in Montana, was you flew over with us, which already seems so incredibly overwhelming when I see people, traveling with kids. And I don't know how you did it, these long flights every summer. But not only that, we would have to fly from Germany to Calgary, and there were no flights going straight to Kalispell or Montana in those days. So we were flying from Frankfurt or Düsseldorf to Calgary, Canada, and from there, Strand Aviation would fly us in this tiny little plane, which I don't even think had two motors. I think it only had one motor, over the Rocky Mountains down into Flathead Valley, which is wild. We would, with our suitcases, go out on the fields in these, in this airport in Calgary. The guy would pick us up, and we'd fly here. Naturally, we were not really good at flying this little plane. My brother and I would get sick, and we would get scared, and it was always bumpy. But there's that one time that I remember that I feel like we were gonna die. And we don't need it doesn't have to be a long-winded story, but I just need you to tell that story because that is wild to me. That whole situation already is wild, but then there's one time I felt like we were literally gonna die because that plane was running out of gas and there was a storm in the Rocky Mountains, and I think I was just screaming, "We're gonna die. Oh, I wanna die," I think. Was that what?
Something like that. I wish I were dead. I think I'm dying.
That's
I think it was Hage, and you just as someone was wailing, Hage, Hage.
Which is what we call my dad. I want my dad. I want to die. And you were trying to. Oh, and then you said you had a gas mask that the pilot gave you, but there was a whole
gas mask. It was an oxygen
well, then
mask.
not a gas mask.
He said he gave it to me to give to your kids, and he thought it would with the
nausea.
It would help them with nausea. But then I saw that his oxygen mask had a hole in it, so I said, no, you keep it. I thought it was a little bit more important.
Oh my God. So
that was a rather nasty flight. The trouble was we couldn't get over, how was it? We couldn't get over the mountains between Montana and Canada. So he flew and flew and flew around to find a place that he could get over that. And then we were behind the mountains here on the right. We had the Swan Range and the Mission Range and those Rocky Mountains going down that way. And then we were behind them, and they were sucked in, and so he was trying to get it because he couldn't get up so high. So he couldn't get up over the top of them, so we basically flew then to the end of the lake, so right Polson around there. We were able to come back and then fly over the lake back to Kalispell. So it was a long flight. And you kids were just, you were sick. And I don't know at that time, as I think you must have been, I don't know if you're still in diapers, no, but anyway, I can remember we landed and I had a little potty and you sat down on the runway, and I don't think you were ever going to get up again.
Oh my God.
And you weren't going to get in another plane because, we had to fly then from Kalispell over to Strand. And I thought you guys were going to absolutely kill me if you could.
Is there something that you feel you wish you would have known, or something comes to mind that you feel like that's something you would like other people to know?
Well, let me see. That's a difficult one.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone, I guess, always made me understand in a kindly manner, so more or less, that I wasn't particularly attractive. And I just can remember, my grandmother and one of her friends and my mother sort of standing looking at me, and I think my grandmother said something like, well, she has a nice mouth. and I can remember Sue coming home from college. She said she doesn't remember it, and saying, oh, look, your nose has grown, or something like that, and I was crushed. And I remember a friend of a mother of a friend of mine, always referred to me as old graceful Gretch, because I guess I was such a klutz. I don't know what. So, but, so I think I just grew in the acceptance that I wasn't particularly attractive, and so you had to develop other things like your sense of humor or your intelligence, so you had to be an interesting person or whatever. And so I guess I didn't concentrate on standing in front of the mirror and trying to improve on what little there was to improve on or whatever. So I guess so it wasn't such an issue for me. And I think maybe that makes you realize there's something more important out there than just your looks.
I mean, first of all, I thought everything I've seen of all the ages that I've seen photos of you, and until today, I find you beautiful. So it's really hard for me to believe.
It was. It's funny.
But I think it's like maybe like a different standard of like what that means or like how that manifests.
I think in Europe that I was looked at differently than in the United States.
Yeah, maybe there is a certain, typical type or something like this.
It's so unimportant.
It's true.
The most important thing is what you are inside,
mm-hmm.
and this is getting too difficult. No, it's just it's getting other people's stories and talking to people and listening to people and exchanging with people. That's what it's all about, and not about how you look, but finding out how people live and learning from their lives and then incorporating it in your own life, which I think we've done a lot of.
And I mean, I feel like have raised me to do that. I mean, here we are sitting because I have this recording equipment because I love listening to people's stories and learning and sharing. And so I feel like you have done a lot of that. And I think you've raised us to do the same, to connect and to listen and to be interested, because it makes life vibrant and it makes it feel important. So thank you for that, Mommy. I appreciate it. I really do, and I love you. And I know that you really did not want to record with me, and I had to be a pain in the ass about it. I had to weed for hours to make up for this, an hour for you to record with me. It was a trade-off.
She's a good garden help. Well, it's not a garden; it's a wilderness.
It's a wilderness, but it's all native plants. We're fighting the invasive weeds, and we're making sure everything is nice and cleared. So we have a huge burn pile that eventually later this year is going to get burned. So, well, thank you. I love you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. It was nice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Big hug, abrazos und bis bald.